According to the Justice Benjamin Odochi Constitutional Commission report submitted in December 1992, the resulting breakdown in the rule of law in the past governments contributed not only to human rights abuse, but also corruption and other forms of abuse of public office, such as nepotism, sectarianism, discrimination, and victimization. Justice Odochi, reflecting later in his 2005 book, Search for National Consensus, detailed that the Bill of Rights was one of the novel introductions to the 1995 Constitution Order. The rights and freedoms enshrined in the bill must be respected, upheld, and promoted by all organs and agencies of government and by all persons. Rights and freedoms are enumerated generally without clawback limitations, which in the past gave power to the state to unduly limit the enjoyment of these rights, especially on grounds of public order, defense, and national security, retired Justice Odochi wrote. Some of the freedoms enshrined under Chapter 4 include equality and freedom from discrimination, protection of right to life, protection of personal liberty, protection of freedom of conscience, expression, movement, religion, assembly, and association, and respect for human dignity and protection from inhuman treatment. Others are protection from slavery, servitude, and forced labor, protection from deprivation of property, right to privacy of person, home and other property, right to a fair hearing, right to just and fair treatment in administrative decisions, prohibition of derogation from particular human rights and freedoms, and human rights and freedoms additional to other rights. The Chief Justice, Owinyi Dolo, who was a delegate in the Constituent Assembly that debated the Constitution, said that the Bill of Rights was largely informed by the country's history of anarchy, sanctly captured in the preamble of the Constitution.
Of course, bills, people have acted in violation of these provisions. Do we have the institutions in place that would defend and ensure the observance of these rights? That's the question that's how I would turn your question into.
Irrespective of what has happened along the road, Justice Dolo said it's incumbent upon everyone to defend the Constitution.
And how do we strengthen the Constitution? We put our money in all sorts of things in the world, but we don't put even 1 cent into civic education. We would be able to defend this Constitution better if we understood our rights. If there's always talk about what you can do, there would be less bloodshed in the defense of rights if people understood what they can do.
Speaking at the Grand Gala at International Conference Center, now Serena Hotel, on October 8, 1995, to usher in the new constitutional order, President Museveni accused President Obote of disenfranchising the people of Uganda and over-centralized power from the districts to the center. At the time, Mr. Museveni had only been in power for 9 years, albeit without elections. After the gala at the International Conference Center, a foundation stone in memory of the covenant was laid at City Square, gazetted by the 1903 Township Ordinance, on which day it was renamed Constitutional Square. As he embarks on the 7th elective term to extend his grip on power past 40 years, there is a general consensus that he finds himself in the exact spot of his predecessors who ruled briefly. 30 years later, after the Constitution was midwifed, the Constitutional Square is encroached by the new court buildings and squatted on by the military. Several rights enshrined in Chapter 4 are curtailed, whittled, or long thrown out of the window, especially on grounds of public order, defense, and most especially regime security. Peace and security, that was once upon a time the selling point of NRM government, is melting fast like glaciers. As general crime festers around the country, the robust security apparatus and about a dozen security agencies are channeled to gas the political opposition. Illegal detentions, torture, killings, forced disappearances, impunity of security agencies, name it, are commonplace, worst of all, usually without accountability, despite several laws, including one on individual culpability.
World over, United Kingdom, America, you hear about all these type of things. You hear about racism in the United States and so on and so forth. So they are there. It is human nature. Since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, we will continue to do this. But to think that you can have a constitution, provision for bills of rights, where in a country nobody plays with it at all, no.
these things that are happening can still be reversed. And it must start with the reducing the political temperature. The politics is too toxic.
The Justice Minister Norbert Mao concurred that police, which is charged with everyday law and order, has questionably assumed a lot of powers.
As you can see, the violence is now unleashed against political activists. I would be happy to hear that, armed robbers are being shot dead, armed robbers are being raided and being disarmed. But it doesn't help when you hear that somebody who has recorded an aggressive message on TikTok wearing political party overalls is the one being arrested.
You have placed a beautiful Bill of Rights in the hands of people who don't know how to apply it, or don't want to apply it, or are misusing it. It is the reason you have a head of state railing and craving and making a lot of noise about the basic structure of any justice system, the presumption of innocence and the grant of bail to persons who have been charged with an offense. Because they don't really care. They don't know how to use the tool.
And it's not just the Constitution. The Human Rights Enforcement Act is very clear about that, saying once it is brought to the court's attention that someone has been tortured, because this is a fundamental, non-derogable right, everything else should pause and the court should investigate and make sure that the rights of this individual are restored and are upheld. So unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So we see the culture of, this has created a culture of impunity where individuals go, beat up individuals, torture, brutalize, and they know they will not be held accountable.
Almost a year later, Police Counterterrorism Unit Charles Bahati, part of the security detail for one of the Supreme Court justices, fatally shot a civilian, Julius Semwaka, along Sezibwa Road for simply refusing to give them the right way. Some reports indicate the police were actually delivering a cake. Bahati fled into hiding and has reportedly eluded police since, but critics who post political messages deemed offensive are smoked out in no time and charged and jailed for disturbing the peace of those in power. The list is long of traffic officers and civilians brutalized by military officers guarding fat cats and government cruising in luxury vehicles paid by taxpayers' money, pushing them off the narrow pothole traffic-infested roads. About a half a dozen National Unity Platform supporters were disappeared by security before and during the 2021 campaign elections, never to be heard from half a decade later. There has been a long trail of death and despair since the 2006 general elections. The images of military armored vehicles menacing through polling stations during the March 13th by-elections in Kawempe are still fresh, while baklava-clad security personnel beat up National Unity Platform supporters and journalists. Lawyer Nicholas Opio described as contrasting having a beautiful Bill of Rights without respect for human rights.
The Constitution is a tool, like any other tool in the hands of the person who uses the tool. You might have an excellent tool. If you place that tool in the arms of a very careless person, it can kill people. It is the case of the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. It is, by the way, one of the provisions of the Constitution that haven't been amended much. In fact, not at all, ever since its enactment. It's remained intact. And yet, you don't have a corresponding respect for human rights in the way we conduct affairs of the state.
We should recall that Article 20 of the Constitution made it very clear that it was the duty of the state as well as its agencies to respect, protect, and uphold all the rights as enshrined in the Constitution. Unfortunately, due to weaknesses, political interference, sometimes lack of resources, there has not been a major breakthrough in that regard.
Drawing parallels from the 1994 report titled Pearl of Blood into human rights violations from 1962 to 1986, the army, police, state security agencies, and the executive have been central in the perpetuation of the cycle of violence. Only the actors have changed, but the script is the same or even worse.